Hello, welcome to our virtual workshop. We appreciate your time and input into the workshop, and we're very excited to work with you on 1495 Heron. My name is Mary Jarvis. I'm a Director of Real Estate with Canada Lands Company, and I'm also the Project Manager for 1495 Heron. Before we get into the workshop, I'd like to provide a brief introduction to Canada Lands Company. Canada Lands Company is a self-financing, non-agent Crown corporation. We acquire surplus federal properties and work with the community to reintegrate these properties into the city fabric through extensive public engagement. This workshop for 1495 Heron begins the process for this site. I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement. We recognize that the City of Ottawa is located on the traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people who've lived on this land for millennia. We extend our respect to all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people for their valuable past and present contributions to these lands. We also recognize and respect the cultural diversity that First Nations, Inuit, Métis people bring to the City of Ottawa. We have a busy agenda. We'll share and exchange information gathered over the past year with respect to 1495. We will present to you where we're at with the project and look for your thoughts on some initial options we've developed for the property. Keep in mind that this is a long-term plan. We will start with a deep study of the site, and then we're working in consideration the visions and guiding principles. The agenda for the workshop includes introduction of the project team. We'll have an overview of the process. We'll move into the workshop where we'll discuss the guiding principles, the urban analysis, and the design approach. So, in addition to CLC, the CLC team, myself, my colleague Sharon Lithwick, project coordinator, Manon Lapensée, Director of Communications. We're supported by Stantec and the Stantec team and the ERA. In 2020, CLC purchased the site 1495 after it was declared surplus by the Government of Canada with the intention of redeveloping and reintegrating the property. We launched a public engagement in the spring of 2021 and received over 400 comments on how to re-envision this property. This information we've used to develop a set of guiding principles, and were used to develop 4 concepts for the property. Our colleagues with Stantec and ERA architects will present the concepts to you, explaining the opportunities and rationales associated with each, and we'll work you through the workshop. I'm happy to now turn this over to Craig Sklenar of Stantec, who will facilitate the workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. My name is Craig Sklenar. I'm a lead urban designer for our Stantec team at our Urban Places Group, and really happy to present to you our approach and process moving forward. As noted, we are in that concept plan and engagement phase of our work. This is the time to receive as much information from you as a community about opportunity and need within the area, and talk through sort of the constraints and approaches of how we view this project in the context of the city. Our strategy for building a community on this site are in essence 6 items. One is a design toolkit of understanding the bits and pieces of how this all puts together. From that toolkit, we're building a framework, which you'll see those 4 concepts as sort of a framework piece. ERA is working with our team and with the City of Ottawa on the approach to heritage to the site. It has a significant value, not only to the neighborhood, but to the city itself. We want to understand the amenities and opportunities that will help bring this site to life in the future. And building that framework for uses. We'll talk a little bit about what that means later on in our process, but understanding that this framework can allow different types of uses within context of the community. And lastly, we're going to really work on building an approach for new development. And once we received all that information, making sure that we communicate back to you how your ideas were built into a preferred plan as we approach a final concept. What we're really not talking about here, though, is detailed architecture. So you will see bubbles and shapes right now. And as we get into more detailed information, we'll show you sort of shapes of buildings, et cetera, but not actual final detailed architecture. We're not here to talk about detailed open space. We are here to talk about what kinds of open spaces are needed and the scale and size of that. Nor are we talking about specific uses. So while we do show a range of uses, we're really meant to build a framework moving this forward. Your role in the process here is really important to our ideation. We really want you to bring ideas to the table. If you're participating in the active workshops, we'd like you to draw or write or speak, however you feel is best to communicate. And we do have an online survey to go through these concepts, and we'd value your input at that time at your leisure. If you're participating actively, in our face-to-face conversations, discuss openly with your neighbors, knowing that this is about a collective conversation, and take your time. If you don't necessarily feel like you have all the insight on day one, there is time for you to input on this throughout the process. As Mary had noted, there was a public engagement session last year that went over a number of ideas that really informed our guiding principles. And I want to walk through those themes really quick with you. The first is the idea of sustainability and open space. This was a high value to the community. Obviously, there's a lot of park space in the area, which we'll talk about in our urban analysis. But what does the open space mean for this site? And what is the sustainability metrics of this site that are going to be really important to the community as a whole? Rainwater management is really important. As we build new development on this site, we need to accommodate that rainwater, but we don't want to see it as just a pond or a piece of infrastructure. We see it as a valuable asset to the community, as some sort of interjection of nature or amenity that can be oriented around. Heritage conservation is top of mind as well. We have significant elements of architecture that need to be incorporated into new development. And how does new development respond to that heritage approach? We heard that this is a mid-rise community, and so it's not single-family detached homes, but it's that in between from a downtown high-rise community. It's really providing a variety of housing typologies in a slightly denser form than currently exists in its context, but it's meant to be complementary to the existing community. And then we have community amenities itself, which are the cultural elements, the programming elements that are important. We have a couple of buildings on site that can accommodate additional amenities, and we want to talk through what those types of uses can be as well. Lastly, we have affordability. This is top of mind these days. We are a growing city here in Ottawa, and we want to make sure that no one's left behind and that we grow together. And so looking at those opportunities for typologies of affordability and affordable housing in particular that meet the mandate of this project. As we move into the actual physical site itself, we want to orient everybody around why this site is important. The City of Ottawa just finished their official plan. Ottawa is a growing city. Projected growth from 2021 to 2046 is quite large. We're seeing about 10 to 15,000 people move into the city every year. And the big policy moves of that official plan were looking at more growth by intensifying existing sites rather than opening new sites for greenfield development. Greenfield development would be like a typical suburban development. We'd rather focus on sites, opportunity sites like 1495 Heron Road as a place to grow internally. A majority of the trips in the city by 2046 should be made by sustainable transportation. That means that we have to build in a more compact urban approach. And by doing that, we need to be more sophisticated in our urban and community design at all scales. So this site is going to have a huge contribution to design and thought of how people live. And we expect this project to live up to that mandate. We want to embed environmental, climate, and health resiliency and energy into everything that we do. And so we're going to be looking at that as part of our project. And economic development as a framework for our planning policies. We're looking to meet all of these mandates through this project under the official plan. Contextually, our site is situated along Heron Road. It is in near proximity to Carleton University, the Ottawa General Hospital, and close proximity to downtown. Our site is bordered on two sides by park space, Heron Road to the south, and low-scale community development to the east. We have a variety of uses in near proximity. However, it's predominantly open space and low-scale residential. The open spaces near our site are quite extensive, and there is a tree canopy cover on every street. We expect this to be a continued theme throughout our site. There are a number of roads, typologies within the area. Predominantly, Heron Road is an arterial road, and it's the only road that serves this site. And so access will be a really important conversation moving our ideas forward. There is quite extensive connectivity to the bus network, noting that Heron Road is identified as a future bus rapid transit corridor, and our project could be seen as an opportunity to build that business case of accelerating those projects concurrently as this project builds out. There are a lot of formal pathways and connectivity pieces, noting, however, many of the roads surrounding our site, the residential roads in particular, have no sidewalks. And we want to make sure that we have connectivity to that. So we're going to really rely on both Heron Road and looking at these informal pathways that are formed in the park spaces. If there's an opportunity to work with the city to make those a little bit more formal and connect the community a little bit more. The building typology is pretty straightforward in terms of a more suburban context. We see more low-scale, single-family detached homes with some variety of multifamily, and we know that the development south, Heron Gate, is looking at new housing typologies within their development as well. We want to understand how that may fit within the context of our site. From a policy framework, this site sits in what they call a transect outer urban. This is an existing suburban urban form, and it's evolving to a more urban typology in the medium to long term of our city. This is a minor corridor in which that it supports a mix of uses along that corridor in more dense and mixed use environments. And that this is a neighborhood context as well, that there's ongoing gradual integrated development that supports that urban transformation. So how does this fit within the context of the entire community, but also how can it help elevate and grow on its own over time? And then lastly, this area has an overlay called evolving neighborhood, and it's this unique opportunity to achieve an urban form in terms of use, density, built form, and site design. And those are going to be part of our approaches to the project overall. With that, I'm going to turn it over to ERA to talk a little bit about the historical context and approach to date of our heritage conservation plan.
Thanks, Craig. My name is Clara Shipman, and I'm a project manager with ERA Architects, who are the heritage consultants on this project. And what I'll do is give you a brief overview of the work that we have underway to understand the heritage-related opportunities and constraints of the site, and how this can inform the future redevelopment moving forward. We started with an understanding of the history of the site. This includes the Indigenous history of the area. We know that Indigenous peoples have lived in Southern Ontario for thousands of years. We also want to understand the settlement history of the area. In the mid-1800s, settlement in the area begins to grow. And originally this was mainly light industrial and agricultural uses. And then later in the early 20th century, this changes to residential use. Next slide, please. In terms of development on the site, in 1959, a religious order called the Sœurs de la Congrégation de Notre-Dame purchased the site. They later pooled their resources with another order and a school board, and they established what is called the Campanile campus. The purpose of this campus is to provide Catholic secondary education to students. In 1973, which is about 15 years later, the campus closes due to financial pressures, and the property is sold to the Government of Canada to be used as a training center. Later in 2014, which is about 40 years later, the site is declared surplus and it becomes vacant. Finally, in 2020, the Canada Lands Company acquires the property, and they are currently working to develop a master plan to guide its redevelopment, which is why we're here together today. Next slide, please. As part of our work, we did what's called a heritage character analysis to understand the physical and cultural patterns that helped shape the site. Most of the buildings on the site, whose boundary you can see here in the dashed blue line, were built in the 1960s in 2 phases. So the first phase included the buildings in light blue, which was the religious cluster. And phase 2 included the buildings that are shown in dark green, which included the community and academic clusters. The buildings that you see in light green were actually built at a later phase after the Campanile campus had closed. Based on our research, we identified 3 themes that represent kind of the guiding ideas that shaped the site. The first we've called human-centered late modernist design, and this is about how the site reflects modernism in architecture and planning in the 1960s. This was a time when architects made connections between social values and architectural forms. The theme also reflects the site's more human-centered design. The second theme we've called cohesive and collaborative campus. And this is about how the site is an interpretation of a traditional college campus approach designed in a collaborative and visually unified way. The third theme is education within community, about how throughout its history, the campus has functioned as an educational facility, enabling the continuation of learning opportunities to serve the community needs. There may also be, these are the 3 themes that we've established so far, and with ongoing discussions, there may be the opportunity for additional themes. Next slide, please. Building on the themes, we identified different elements of the site that contribute to its character. To list just a few, we find a visual coherence in the groupings of the buildings and landscape elements, in the design and in the materials. So for example, we find repetitive architectural forms, and we find the clustering of buildings around courtyards. Otherwise, there are contrasts and variations which create visual interest, such as the interplay of light and shadow, textured and smooth surfaces, and variations in building heights. Another element is the balance between openness and contraction found in the range of open spaces, as well as the interrelationship between buildings and exterior space. There are also variations in topography, which contribute to the varied character of the landscape, and variations in open space, which range from large courtyards to more intimate brick-screened areas. Finally, the buildings and the open space are designed at a pedestrian scale. Next slide, please. Another part of the heritage analysis is understanding existing conditions. The buildings on the site are generally in fair condition, although there is evidence of moisture, infiltration, and designated substances. Upgrades will be needed to bring the buildings to current standards, such as building code and accessibility standards. In terms of landscape, the design generally remains legible, although upgrades will also be needed to bring it to current standards. Many built elements in the landscape have deteriorated, and some plantings have changed over time. So for example, you can see the overgrowth in the photos on the right. In terms of reusing existing buildings for other purposes, there are some challenges. Each building was designed for its original function, which may make introducing new functions difficult. As noted, they require upgrades to meet current standards, and buildings in some cases may become less efficient with these upgrades. For example, there may be a need for additional circulation. With certain buildings, deterioration may make their reuse more challenging. Despite challenges, there are actually also a lot of potential for reuse, given the kind of robust structures of the buildings and the anticipated lifespan of materials. Beyond supporting the heritage value, the reuse of existing buildings where possible will also potentially yield sustainability benefits. Next slide, please. So what does this all mean for redevelopment? Based on our analysis, we did develop some preliminary conservation principles to help inform design decisions moving forward. These include consideration for degrees of sensitivity to change within site elements, including opinions from stakeholders regarding priorities. We've heard, for example, that priorities include the chapel, the theater, entrance canopy, which you can see in this photo, the bell tower, which is in this photo kind of beyond the canopy, as well as intimate exterior space. While I won't list them all, some of the other considerations based on the characterizing elements include the clustering of buildings and the creation of a range of enclosed exterior space types, attention to sight lines, the human experience of the buildings and the site through the use of materials and their interrelationships, and the integration of built form and landscape elements, including varied topography, pathways, and plantings. With that, I'll hand it back to Craig.
And so we've taken all of these consideration elements and have started to formulate 4 different unique concepts. Our design approach is looking at this in our design toolkit, and you'll see those 4 options in our survey. But I want to talk about 2 very specific elements. One is the idea of uses. At this time, we're not, as we've said, we're not considering specific uses, but rather a framework of how typologies of uses could fit within this site. We have eliminated the idea of things like industrial or heavy commercial that would not be complementary to the community, but there may be a range of, say, residential uses or retail uses that would be complementary, or institutional uses that would fit into the site. So we'd really have the community look at this in a framework of how a wide variety of those kinds of uses could fit within the context of this site, and really have us focus on the structuring elements, the roadways, the parks, the walkways, and stormwater facilities and amenities of this site, and even the heritage elements. They're going to be really important to make this a complete development. We have heard that school is a potential of the site, and we want to talk a little bit about that. You'll see that in our concepts. Under the Planning Act of Ontario, school boards may reserve lands in a subdivision plan. This process is a plan of subdivision ultimately, and so the school boards have considered this. If a school board does not take the land within 7 years, it can revert back and into a different typology of development. But at this time, we have heard from the French Public Schools of Ontario that this site is an ideal candidate for them within 3 to 5 acres. So you will see in all of our options a site in a proximity location of where a school may go, and want you to think about where the best piece of that, or where the school would be most appropriate within the site, so that we can communicate that back with continued conversation with the school board itself. So this is our toolkit. We have our roadways, our school site at 3 to 5 acres, the consideration of heritage itself, stormwater facilities, where future buildings may go and the areas that they would occupy, and the open spaces. And each of those elements are color coded in our concepts. So think about those in a broad contextual broad context when you're reviewing the sites themselves. I want to thank you for your time today. We really look forward to your input. Please know that our online survey is running through February 27th. take your time. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us, and we look forward to hearing from you in the near future.